Hello there, welcome to episode 3 in Chalet Baron. This is called Using the Tonal Hand, and in video number 2 I mentioned some terms, or maybe I didn't mention some terms, I honestly don't remember, but it's going to be the sticking hand on this side and the tonal hand on this side, because this is the side that controls most of the tones. I'd say 99% of the tones are controlled off the back and the rest are controlled off the front. But really quick, just a quick mention about the sticking hand and tone is on the drum. There's sweet spots all over the skin, and depending on what kind of sound and what kind of tone you want, like any sort of rimmed and vibrating instrument, you are going to find a specific type of set of tones. The center here is going to be where you're going to find the deepest tone, thereabouts. It's where most of the energy is going to spread out the most, and it's going to spread out most evenly, and it's going to bounce back off the rim. And it's going to be the easiest. And I'll try to do most of this video with the drum head either facing this way or away so you can see the back of it. Then if you get about to like 1/2 out of the skin, or the 1/3, you're going to start with a slightly different set of resonances, and when you get up near the actual rim, you can hear the difference. So center, half, and up by the rim. And the smaller the drum, and this is really not the drum maybe to show it on, because the smaller the drum, the less change there is, whereas on if you're playing like a 16 or 18 inch drum, it's going to have a lot more pronounced sound. So the whole excuse me, got a bit of a cold, I'm working with it. You can hear the slightly different tonal changes, slightly different sort of characteristics, personalities, I guess even you can even call them to it. But again, small drums like this one, it's a little less effective. Bigger drums like the 16 and 18s and 2022s, etc., they make a whole lot more various range of sounds. Okay, so let's get started. I got my little list here. The open tone, which is what I was doing earlier, which is just straight out off the back of the drum. Nothing's covering it. And various ways to control the tone has a lot to do with what type of stick you're using. If you're using a nice, a club end or something, you're going to get a nice warm sound out of it. And just because there's an absence of the tonal hand on the back doesn't mean that you can't get different sounds. The type of stick that you use is going to make a big difference. Or maybe you prefer a more bundled, more of a stick bundle sort of strikes. Or a slimmer sort of single end stick sort of thing. They're all going to have different sort of, from the stick itself, provide you with slightly different tones and sort of characteristics of striking. One of the easiest things to do is the flat tones, and the flat tones are done when you take your hand and put it flat on the back of the drum. So there is no, I don't know if you can see it too well, but there is no separation between my hand and the back. It's perfectly flat. And I'll use this guy, use a little thin guy for this. And you can hear it striking, and you're going to strike right on the big flat bit. and you can release it. Flat hands are great because you can actually add a lot of a lot of character. So if you're playing maybe something straight off the flat. The flat is nice because you can have total control with that hand with no very little reverberation and no excess reverberation. It's nice because that ability to press in and out also gives extra tone. In the same way that any sort of tonal movement can. So flats are really great, and sometimes like on big drums like the big double skin drum that I have, you can do those flats and help actually cut through a session because it's such a sharp sound. But that same sort of flat, when transferred around the drum, it carries some of that tonal change when you play above the hand, which would be played right above in here, and transfers it to a flat hand. You don't get that much dynamic out of it. It's actually not that dynamic, and the point of it is to be pretty much muscle when you play. But it makes a nice sort of light skipping sound if you ever want to, maybe you're like using stick bundles. It makes a really nice sort of jig thing. Again, that's just the open and the flat. So there's open and flat. Excuse me. Next is something that you see and will probably use more consciously than the open and flat hits, and it's going to be playing above and below the hand. And this is where you start controlling tones, leading away from the center. And what this does is that you're going to start bending pitch as you go, but you're also going to be changing how much flap the skin actually has. So as you play, as the hand rolls up the back here, side. There we go. So I'm playing right. See where my thumb is pointing up? I have this sort of half triangle. Geez, half rectangle, and it's right in here. I'm playing right in there. Those pops that are really popular now are actually happening way up here, and they're happening in that little tiny space. And not everyone will do the thumb thing. I do the thumb thing because it localizes. When you get near the top, it kind of disappears, and you have to sort of do the best you can to get as much, or rather as little space as you can between your finger and the tuning. But playing below the drum will get you a different sound. So if you're off center, like this, and you got a pop sound, and you got underneath, you got now this is covered, so it's not opening. going lower, you can actually do the same sort of thing, but now I'm still playing above the hand. And again, at the bottom, you don't have as much room. There's not as much room, and I find it more difficult to try to play that bottom section with the flat hand. So I try to do a few things that I find are a bit more useful. Instead of having my hand this way, I turn it down like this. And what this does is that instead of creating this sort of very narrow field, it actually opens up a field. It's a little bit uncomfortable on the wrist, and if you're a guitar player, this is actually going to be easier for you. Down there. So instead of just moving up and down here, it's going to go down. And you're going to be turning it. That sort of thing. You're not going to get as much clarity, and it's just because of how weight is transferred from your arm down onto a space like that. Remember, the hand is an asymmetrical thing. It is going to provide, because of your thumb, more pressure pointing in the up direction than the down direction. So you are going to have a bit of a difference. Because you can control tones, you know, going up. And I find that really, really helpful if I want rich tones. If I want really, really rich tones, it doesn't really work coming up. This is if I just want more of an accent rather than a full tone. So when I play, I actually think of this as, if this were a drum kit, and it kind of sort of is, this down here is like your bass drum, and up here is like your toms. You can do the same thing down here in a way, because you stop using the flat of your hand and you start using the heel. So the heel's pressing in now, and it gives you a nice big thick bit of muscle and fatty bit of the hand, and just sort of stick it right in there. That's really the control of the bass. I personally find it to be the cleanest bass played off the bottom. Some people will find it off the top, and I'm not sure how they do that. I just don't seem to bend. My hand doesn't seem to like to pick up things that way. Maybe if you've got thicker, stronger, like I got very lean hands, and I have a large hand but a very thin set of fingers, and they don't. It can be a bit of a struggle to hit certain tones. You know, that sort of thing. Another thing I love to do is the fingers. The fingers. If you ever watch Johnny McDonough play on some of those videos on YouTube, and I'll put some of them up following this video, I'll put them in the same little section here. There is I'll try to find some, and I'll try to put them up. He sometimes plays up here, and he'll sometimes shift his fingers around to get different tones. One of the things that I like to do is just the knuckle on the back, pressing from the center and straight up. And I did this in a video on the Ballroom Facebook page a little while back, but the sound it creates is like a talking drum. Oops, where's my stick? There we go. Kind of like a talking drum. Oops. Let's see if I can... above and below, and fingers. Fingers are cool because you can actually hit harmonics in the drum head. You can go from the center tone again, it's much easier to do this on a bigger drum, and I really probably should have done this on the bigger drum. So if I have time, I'll upload a part 2 to this. It'll just be like a minute or two of me playing on my bigger Walton's drum, so you can actually get a better idea. But something that you also want to try with the whole fingers thing is when you are being more considerate about tone, experiment with the actual slack of the drum head, because as you tighten the drum head, you're actually going to get a set of different properties, because now the rate of flap on the skin to the actual rim is changed. In fact, it's more, but it's less frequent, whereas it's a faster repetition rather than a slower repetition. If it's very, very, that's a little bit better. If it's a little bit looser like this, there's actually going to be more flap, but it's going to be more resonant. So experiment with stuff with the fingers, especially with those flat hits. I like that one, that's nice. One thing I like to do is a cupping method. So I take, instead of the flat strike, I actually will cup my hand and create a space of air behind it. I really, really like that because it contours the sound, and where I really like to actually use this is outside in very sort of bricky sort of downtown settings where you can shoot, literally you can target shoot. Like if this was a cannon, this is the end of the cannon, you can target shoot stuff out of this cannon and you can actually bounce it off of objects. It's really fun. Like one of the things you also got to remember for tones is playing around with your surroundings, because this thing makes most of its sound going this way, it makes most of its sound going that way. It doesn't make much sound going this way, which kind of sucks, because to get a really good idea of what you sound like, you kind of have to stick your head down or stick your head somewhere else so that you can hear more in the direct line. But you can target it. So if you like muffled sounds, play up against something that's padded. You don't want that much reverberation, do that. But if you want big open reverberation, maybe you want to hit up your local university and say, hey, can I use your general sort of meeting hall for an hour so I can practice? You're going to get a whole different set of dynamics, and you can literally shoot sounds. Those really tight pops can actually be shot around rooms, and the full bass line can actually be filling rooms in different ways. So one of the cool things is that you can experiment with the architecture around you, because a lot of those sounds that you like are not just made by this, but they're made by other sounds being reverberated back from the drum, coming back, whether they're fragmented, whether they're true, whether they're phased, etc., coming back. They're going to start playing with the sound of this. That's why I hate playing this thing in my bedroom, or in fact even in this room here, because, well, the ceiling's a bit lower and the walls are a bit bricky, but they're kind of close together, so it doesn't really work. I actually would rather play in like a grand hall or something like someone's kitchen, where there tends to be more slap back from the sound. So that's the surrounding areas and the fingers. Oh, another thing about the fingers, about that whole tougher lower area, your fingers can do lots of different things. You actually can do, here you go, live long and prosper, folks. You can actually use the whole Spock Vulcan thing, because now you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 sections that you can play, and if you kind of angle it in such a way, you can actually get different sounds out of it. Or you can block off sections You know, down there. You know, you can really get. Yeah, you can really experiment by using your hand to not only provide point pressures, flats, tone controls, and of course anything else like the cupping technique or spidering your fingers like that, but you can localize sound by creating sort of like mini drum heads, and you can create different sets of tonal. So if you're someone who doesn't like to play, and maybe this is a good exercise for you, is to, instead of moving your hand around, just create, a set of whatever, there's the Spock thing, and just slap it somewhere on the drum. See what you created. When I play a lot of African music, I don't do a lot of slidey tone control unless I'm using my knuckles. I actually find that sort of technique all over the drum head, not moving my hand. Probably do a bit of sliding, which brings me on to the next part, which is the tone slide. And the tone slide is where you, I'm starting to lose some of my tuning here. It's dry in here, so this will be just a sec. I love small body drums. These things tune like that. They're so easy. Slides. Sliding the tone is really, really nice. I'm going to use something with a bit more of a mallet sound. Sliding the tone is when you can hit the drum and you can slide it. Oops. On a smaller drum, it's going to be harder because the slapback's going to be a lot less because those reverberations die out really quick and get absorbed or canceled out as they come back to the center of the drum. In big drums, you can slide a lot more. Also, the slacker the drum head, the easier it is to do these slides. Let's see if I can give you a slightly better. There we go. And when you're sliding, I tend to use the fatty bit of my hand, which is sort of this fatty bit that goes around here. Also, if you're from the outside striking and then sliding inward, it's going to be more pronounced. It's very hard to reverse that and get sort of a do in and do coming out, do sort of in and out sort of thing. There's more control, and it's just physics to come from something that has more reverberation to less than go from less reverberation to more, because there's more energy moving around, whereas there's less energy that's moving around localized. Which means when you start pulling away, you're not going to have much volume, you're not going to have much dynamic. So the sliding is really, really nice. Because sometimes, like, it's great to use when you play. You can do a lot with that, and you can do it with your knuckles to make that talking drum sort of sound. Oops, can't really. You know, you can do that as well. Doesn't work quite as well with the flat hand, but if you start using things like the blade of the hand, I can't do it on this because the drum's too small and too deep, but I can do it on my Finnegan Hill drum, which is not as deep, going in that way. Some people will use the outside of the hand. Ronan O'Snody I've seen do a few times where he's switched over and gone this way. You know, the hand's a really neat thing because look how many angles and Like, look how many things. Like, it's the most variable thing on your body. Look what you can do with it. You can do good hard stuff on the back. One of the things I love to do, and I'll show you this. Try this out. Get yourself a thinner stick, one of these dudes, and take your hand and do the okay sign. Everything is okay. This is what you need, because this is the control. You're going to open and close the aperture. You're going to put it somewhere on the drum head. I like it down here to about a third, but I'll show you from the center as well. Maybe I can make this work. And you're going to strike on the inside of it. Can't really do it up here. I don't think it'll work. No, I just don't have that ability to put my hands so flat. So that's a little thing I can do just by doing that. You know, all bare knuckle on the back. If you like African music, this is a great technique to learn. It's really, really good. The pipe slide I showed, I think, in an old video. I don't have my pipe with me, but I will do a whole video just on the pipe slide. All I have is like a 6-inch piece of PVC pipe. I'm going to be using it on a larger drum. I'm probably going to be using it on my RWE just because I think it sounds best on my RWE. But that is just some stuff you can try. So remember, like, you got the flat hits, open tones, above and below the hand, above, below, so your tom section and your bass drum tone section. And you also got the knuckles, the fingers, which can do any multitude of things, and point and harmonics. 1, 2, and usually 3. 1, 2, usually 3, and then you run out of space. You can get some nice clean tones out of it. To finish off, and just really quick, the type of skin you have is going to also dictate broadly what your sound is going to be like. So one of the things that I'm recently finding out, I recently got a kangaroo skin drum from Finnegan Hill Irish Percussion, and one of the things I'm learning is that in that setup with that type of skin, that skin booms, it's quite loud. So to control some of the tones on that, I have to work with trying to temper how I'm using my sticking hand rather than my hand, my tonal control hand. I also find that I need to press less. Skins that are thicker and heavier, and this is thicker than that kangaroo skin, you're going to have to press a little bit more to get an effect before you start knocking the drum out of its own tune, even though it's in tune. So, sorry, a bit of hiccups there. So, yeah, also keep in mind, like, the tone working with that hand, the big things that do matter is this type of skin, the size of the drum, and the tuning rim. It's debatable whether or not the frame actually does anything. I actually think the frame does some things. I've talked with a few snare drum manufacturers. I know that the snare drum is not a ball run. However, I have seen some interesting woods that have been used, like walnut or paddock or maple. And maple doesn't boom the same as Padwick, and if you want a good all-rounder, that can do pretty much like a good jack of all trades wood, it's walnut. So, depending on how the drum is made makes a big difference. This Hedvig Shack drum has an inner structural tone ring which holds the tuning pegs, and then it has the actual thing here. On my Finnegan Hill and my Waltons, they're actually, the tuning pegs are into the frame itself, so a little bit different. But that's also going to make slightly small changes as to how sound is coming out, because we have on the inside here a gap, and in my Finnegan Hill drum, for example, or my Waltons, there's no gap, it's just straight out the back. Whether or not that actually controls any sort of the sound, I don't know personally. It's been debated a bit. I have 2 or 3 opinions about it, and I've talked with a few other drummers, and they're split. Some say it does make it. One guy said there is no difference whatsoever. So I don't have data to back this up. This is just sort of food for thought rather than anything else. So that's episode 3, using the tone hand. Try it out. You got a totally variable set of stuff on the back. You can add to the tonal hand by using things like a pipe, or you can use like little hand shakers you can put on the back. Later on I'm going to be doing the thing that Ronan O'Snody did in his video, which is mimic the snare drum using a brush on the back of it, a jazz brush or a drum kit brush. So try stuff out. Again, see what's comfortable with your hand, and keep practicing the basics, because the tonal hand itself is going to provide more variability than your technique to actually do its sticking. So I'd say about like 70% of what you're doing out there is going to be off the back of the hand. This hand that is hidden is often sort of those working behind the scene at a play. They're the ones who are putting it all together, and that's, in some way, if this isn't going, this isn't going to work. This is your tone, and eventually when you get used to playing something, you don't have to think about it too much. Then you can start playing around with that and make it, again, the usual bunch of sort of tips. Make tons of mistakes, and again, your muscle memory will get it the more you play and the more you practice. So hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see if I can put up some of the other videos on here linking to this, especially the other one with my Waltons for the talking drum head. I may leave that to another video. I'm a little busy today, but I will find some other videos with Johnny McDonough, and I will try to find one John Joe Kelly one as well, so you can see the back of the drum being played. Till then, have a good, what is it, Monday today? Holy crap, it's Monday. Have a good Monday and have a good week, folks. Bye.